Chapter 5. The Gathering of Ronin. The village center had been transformed into a makeshift council area. Wooden benches formed a rough circle around a central fire pit where flames crackled despite the daylight, offering both warmth and symbolic focus. Toru had just returned from a scouting mission, his normally stolid expression tight with concern as he joined the 4 Ronin already seated. "They've established a formal dueling ground," the blacksmith reported, "a cleared area halfway between the village and their vessel. They've marked it with some kind of boundary posts, glowing symbols on each corner." Takeshi nodded, having expected something of the sort. The encounter the previous day had been brief but revelatory. The alien delegation had used an elaborate series of gestures to communicate their intention to establish a ritual combat arena where formal challenges would be issued and accepted. "When will the challenges begin?" Masaru asked, his habitually cautious tone edged with tension. "Tomorrow at dawn," Takeshi replied. "That much was clear from their gestures." Kenji laughed, the sound incongruous in the serious atmosphere. "How considerate of our 4-armed friends to schedule their hunt so politely. Perhaps we should offer them tea before they kill us." "Mock if you wish," Hiroshi said, his scarred face impassive. "But there is purpose in their formality. They seek worthy combat, not mere slaughter." "And we're to be grateful for the distinction," Kenji countered, though his flippant tone didn't quite mask the underlying tension. Before Hiroshi could respond, the arrival of a new figure silenced the gathering. A man in his early 30s strode into the council area, his bearing unmistakably that of a trained warrior. He wore worn but well-maintained armor, and the 2 swords at his hip, both katana length rather than the traditional katana wakizashi combination, marked him as a practitioner of an uncommon fighting style. "I am Daichi," he announced without preamble, surveying the gathered Ronin with cool assessment. "I heard rumors of star demons offering worthy combat. I've come to test my blades against them." Takeshi rose to his feet, offering a formal bow that the newcomer returned with precise depth, neither subservient nor disrespectful. "I am Takeshi. These are Hiroshi, Masaru, and Kenji. We welcome your strength in the coming battle." Daichi's gaze lingered on each Ronin in turn, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "I've heard of these creatures. 4 arms, insect-like features, weapons beyond imagination. The tales seemed too fantastic to believe." "They are real enough," Hiroshi said grimly, "and tomorrow at dawn, they will begin issuing formal challenges." "Good." Daichi's response was immediate and without reservation. "I've traveled 3 provinces seeking worthy opponents. If these star demons offer such opportunity, I welcome it." Kenji snorted softly. "Eager to die, are you?" Daichi's eyes hardened as they fixed on the younger Ronin. "Eager to live fully before death comes, as it comes to all. Something you might learn, child, if you live long enough." "Child?" Kenji's hand drifted toward his sword hilt, his perpetual grin replaced by a scowl. "I've killed men twice your age for less insult." "Enough." Takeshi's voice cut through the tension, carrying the unmistakable authority of a battlefield commander. "Save your aggression for the aliens. We need unity, not petty conflicts." Kenji's hand slowly withdrew from his sword, though his expression remained stormy. Daichi merely inclined his head slightly, neither apologizing nor escalating. Miyako chose that moment to enter, carrying a tray with tea and simple provisions. "I thought our defenders might need sustenance," she said, setting the tray in the center of the gathering. Her aged eyes took in the newcomer with a single assessing glance. "Another warrior joins our cause. Good. We will need every blade." As the old woman distributed cups of steaming tea, Takeshi used the momentary distraction to observe the 5 Ronin now gathered, himself included. Each man sat according to his nature. Hiroshi upright and formal, despite his weathered appearance. Masaru slightly apart, positioned to observe everyone and potential approaches. Kenji lounging with deceptive casualness, his eyes sharp despite his relaxed posture. And now Daiichi, seated in perfect saiza, his twin blades arranged precisely at his side. 5 masterless samurai, each carrying personal failures and disgraces, now united against an enemy from beyond the stars. The irony was not lost on Takeshi. "We should each speak of our combat experience," he suggested after Miyako had withdrawn, "not to compare status, but to understand what strengths we bring to this fight." Hiroshi nodded approval. A wise approach. He straightened, his scarred face catching the firelight in a way that emphasized its deep furrows. "I served Lord Oda for 20 years before his betrayal and death. I fought in 12 major battles and more skirmishes than I can count. I faced Korean troops, Chinese mercenaries, and Portuguese gunmen. My specialty is battlefield tactics rather than individual dueling, though I am proficient in the Ito Ryu style." The scarred Ronin paused, then added with unexpected candor, "I survived when many better men died. Some would call that luck, others cowardice. I call it persistence." "There is no shame in survival," Takeshi observed quietly. Hiroshi's expression suggested he disagreed, but would not argue the point. Masaru spoke next, his voice measured and precise as always. "I served as personal bodyguard to Lord Imagawa's youngest son. When assassins came, I detected their approach but hesitated a crucial moment, doubting my instincts." His face tightened. "My lord died because of that hesitation. I have spent the 7 years since perfecting defensive techniques, ensuring I will never fail in such a manner again." "So you live in perpetual atonement," Daiichi observed, his tone neither judging nor sympathetic. "Carrying your failure like armor." Masaru met his gaze steadily. "As do we all, in our own ways." A brief silence followed this exchange, broken by Kenji's theatrical sigh. "Well, since we're sharing our tragic histories." He straightened slightly, though his posture remained more casual than the others. "I studied under Master Yagyu until he expelled me for, quote, unconscionable recklessness and disrespect for tradition. Apparently, developing my own techniques rather than mindlessly repeating ancient forms was unacceptable." He grinned, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Since then, I've made my way through life's various challenges using those same innovative techniques my former master found so objectionable. I've yet to encounter an opponent, human at least, who could match my speed." "Speed without discipline is merely haste," Daiichi commented. Kenji's grin sharpened. "Says the man carrying 2 long swords like some backwater innovation? What's your story then? Did your master forbid your precious technique as well?" A dangerous stillness came over Daiichi, the kind that experienced warriors recognized as preceding lethal action. "My master did more than forbid it," he said, each word precisely weighted. "When I demonstrated the effectiveness of the Naiten Ichi Ryu style, he declared it dishonorable, an affront to traditional swordsmanship. When I persisted, he attempted to cripple my sword arm to end my training permanently." Daiichi's hand unconsciously moved to his left sword. "I killed him. Not in anger, but in the pure clarity of combat. His traditional technique against my innovation. The outcome speaks for itself." The revelation landed heavily in the circle. Killing one's master was among the most serious transgressions a samurai could commit, a violation of the sacred bond between teacher and student. "You killed your own master?" Masaru's voice held shock, poorly disguised as neutral inquiry. "He attacked with lethal intent. I defended myself. Daichi replied without emotion. The technique he sought to eradicate proved superior. That is the only truth that matters in combat. And now you wander, testing your two-sword style against any worthy opponent? Takeshi observed. Daichi inclined his head slightly. Until now, I have found few truly worthy challenges. The implied criticism hung in the air until Hiroshi cleared his throat. And you, Takeshi? What path led you to this village at this moment? Takeshi stared into the fire for a long moment before responding. I served Lord Asakura faithfully for 15 years. I stood beside him in victory and defeat. I was elsewhere on patrol when a trusted ally betrayed him, allowing assassins into his private chambers. His voice remained steady, despite the pain the memories evoked. I arrived in time to witness his beheading, but too late to prevent it. And the betrayer? Kenji asked, his usual flippancy absent. Dead by my hand before the day ended, Takeshi replied simply, along with the assassins. But vengeance did not restore my lord, nor my purpose. So you've wandered since then, Hiroshi surmised, taking odd duties protecting villages and merchants, but never committing to a new lord. Takeshi nodded. Until now, when an enemy beyond imagination has provided clarity, I've lacked for years. A contemplative silence fell over the gathering, as each man considered his own journey to this unlikely convergence. 5 Ronin, masterless samurai carrying personal failures and disgraces, now potentially the main line of defense against hunters from the stars. Toru, who had been silent throughout these exchanges, finally spoke. You each carry different fighting styles, different strengths and weaknesses. How will you fight as one against these creatures? Who said anything about fighting as one? Daichi asked coldly. I fight my own battles. Kenji laughed. Of course you do, with a blade in each hand and no one to watch your back. Enough, Takeshi intervened before Daichi could respond. Toru raises a valid point. We have observed that these aliens fight with predictable patterns despite their four-armed advantage. If we combine our knowledge and adapt our techniques accordingly, we improve our chances significantly. And how do you propose we do that? Hiroshi asked, though his tone suggested he already anticipated the answer. We observe their combat methodology together, Takeshi replied, then train collectively, developing counters that play to each of our strengths. Masaru nodded thoughtfully. Logical, though time is short for such coordination. Then we had best begin immediately, Takeshi concluded, rising to his feet with practiced control that disguised his still healing wounds. The aliens have been challenging individual villagers to combat at the edge of the forest. We should observe their next encounter. Hiroshi raised a skeptical eyebrow. And do nothing while a villager dies. We cannot interfere with their ritual combat without potentially triggering an all-out attack, Takeshi replied, his expression grim. Observation now may save many lives later. The uncomfortable truth of this assessment silenced further objections. One by one, the Ronin rose and prepared their weapons for the scouting mission. Their movements revealed their distinct characters. Hiroshi methodical and thorough, Masaru checking and rechecking his equipment, Kenji with casual efficiency, and Daichi with precise economy, each motion perfectly executed. As they prepared to depart, Goro approached, his expression troubled. A hunting party from the next village has been intercepted by the star visitors, he reported. They're being escorted to what appears to be a dueling ground at the forest edge. Takeshi nodded. Then we have our opportunity to observe. He addressed the gathered Ronin. We move quietly. We watch. We learn. Nothing more today. The unspoken implication, that they would watch men die without intervening, hung heavily in the air, but none voiced objection. This was the harsh calculus of their situation. Sacrifice some now to better prepare for saving many later. From their concealed position on a forested rise, the 5 Ronin observed the clearing below with the focused attention of experienced warriors. 3 village hunters stood facing 2 alien warriors, their expressions a mixture of terror and resignation. Behind them, a 3rd hunter lay dead, green fluid still glistening on the alien blade that had taken his life. "They're initiating some kind of formal ritual," Takeshi observed quietly, noting the precise movements of the lead alien, a towering figure whose armor bore more elaborate markings than the others. "The human on the left, he's accepting the challenge," Hiroshi added, his experienced eye catching the subtle shift in the man's stance. Below, the selected hunter stepped forward, clutching a spear with white-knuckled determination. The alien warrior approached, making a series of ritualistic gestures before assuming a combat stance, with all 4 arms extended in different guard positions. What followed was brief but informative. The human hunter thrust desperately with his spear, displaying more courage than technique. The alien evaded with fluid grace, 2 upper arms deflecting the weapon while its lower arms simultaneously drew blades that gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Watch the pattern," Takeshi whispered urgently. "Upper arms defensive, lower arms offensive, but the transitions between, there's the vulnerability." The hunter managed to maintain distance for several exchanges, his spear's reach temporarily negating the alien's advantage. But a misstep on uneven ground created an opening that the alien exploited with ruthless efficiency. 4 arms moved in coordinated sequence. Block, disarm, strike, strike, leaving the hunter collapsed on the ground, his life's blood soaking into the forest soil. 7 movements from initial engagement to killing stroke, Masaru noted clinically, though his face had paled. Efficient. No wasted motion. "Did you notice the footwork?" Kenji asked, his usual levity absent. "They favor their right side despite the forearm advantage. Creates a blind spot on the left rear quadrant." Daiichi nodded. "I saw it too. A potential weakness if one could move quickly enough to exploit it." The aliens below performed what appeared to be a brief ceremonial acknowledgement of the fallen hunter, before one turned toward the remaining villager. The man, wisely recognizing his hopeless situation, dropped his weapon and prostrated himself on the ground. "He surrenders," Hiroshi observed. "Let's see how they respond." The lead alien approached the prostrate villager, studied him for a moment, then made a dismissive gesture. The man was allowed to rise and retreat, stumbling away toward the village without looking back. "They have no interest in unwilling or incapable opponents," Takeshi concluded. "Further evidence they seek worthy combat, not merely killing." "Cold comfort to the dead," Masaru remarked quietly. As they continued observing, the aliens collected small trophies from the fallen hunters, locks of hair, a tooth, a piece of clothing, storing these in containers attached to their armor. Then, with ceremonial precision, they departed toward their encampment, leaving the bodies where they had fallen. "We should retrieve them," Hiroshi said once the aliens were out of sight. "Proper burial is the least we can offer." Takeshi nodded agreement. "But first, let us return to the village and discuss what we've learned." The training ground behind Toru's forge had been cleared of equipment and debris, creating an open space adequate for combat practice. Here, as the afternoon shadows lengthened, the 5 Ronin gathered to integrate their observations into practical strategy. Their 4-armed style follows predictable sequences, Takeshi began, demonstrating with movements. The pattern always initiates with the upper arms, creating openings that the lower arms exploit. But there's a fractional delay between upper and lower movements that can be utilized. Hiroshi nodded. I noticed that as well. It's similar to the coordination challenges in formations with mixed weapon types. Spears and swords operating at different ranges require precise timing. The key, Takeshi continued, is to disrupt their rhythm. When forced to improvise beyond their trained sequences, the advantage of 4 arms becomes momentarily lessened by the complexity of coordinating them. So we target the transition points, Kenji surmised, demonstrating with a swift feint followed by a direction change. Like this, draw the upper response, then shift to attack where the lower arms aren't yet positioned. Precisely, Takeshi confirmed, though executing such timing against their speed and reach remains challenging. Daiichi, who had been silent during the initial discussion, stepped forward. My two-sword style offers a potential advantage here. While one blade engages the upper attack, the second can exploit the delay before their lower arms respond. To demonstrate, he drew both his katanas in a smooth motion. The gathering watched with professional interest as he moved through a series of forms clearly adapted from standard techniques, but transformed by the use of 2 full-length blades simultaneously. Interesting, Hiroshi acknowledged, his initial skepticism giving way to tactical assessment, though it requires exceptional coordination of its own. Which I possess, Daiichi stated, without boasting, merely as fact. Against human opponents, perhaps, Masaru cautioned. These creatures have spent lifetimes perfecting their 4-armed combat. Our innovations must be tempered with realistic assessment of their capabilities. Kenji laughed, always the voice of caution. These star demons may be strong, but they're fighting in a gravity and atmosphere they didn't evolve in. That's bound to create limitations we can exploit. A valid point, Takeshi agreed, surprising the younger Ronin. They've adapted their techniques to our environment, but perfect adaptation requires generations, not mere observation. As the discussion continued, each Ronin demonstrated aspects of their personal fighting styles, allowing the others to identify strengths and weaknesses. Hiroshi's technique was traditional but flawlessly executed, emphasizing proper distance and timing. Masaru's defensive capabilities were exceptional, his movements designed to create counterattack opportunities while minimizing exposure. Kenji's style was unorthodox and lightning fast, incorporating elements from multiple schools in unpredictable combinations. Daiichi's two-sword approach offered simultaneous offense and defense capabilities beyond conventional techniques. And Takeshi's own style, refined through 15 years of dedicated service, balanced all elements with neither weakness nor particular specialty, a complete expression of classical swordsmanship. We should pair for practice, Takeshi suggested, each of us attempting to mimic the alien 4-armed attacks while our partner develops counters. Impossible to truly replicate 4 simultaneous attacks with only 2 arms, Daiichi objected. Not simultaneously, Takeshi clarified, but we can simulate their attack patterns and rhythms, focusing on the timing elements that create vulnerability. They separated into pairs, Takeshi with Hiroshi, Masaru with Kenji, while Daiichi worked through solo forms adapted to counter the observed alien techniques. As they trained, the differences in their approaches became increasingly apparent, not merely technical variations but fundamental philosophical divergences in how they understood combat itself. Hiroshi fought with methodical precision, each movement exactly as generations of Ito-Ryu masters had prescribed. When Takeshi simulated alien attack patterns, the older Ronin responded with textbook counters, effective but predictable. You fight as though combat is mathematics, Takeshi observed during a break. Precise, calculated by the numbers. Hiroshi wiped sweat from his scarred brow. Because it is. In the chaos of battle, adherence to proven technique is what separates survival from death. Even when technique fails? Takeshi challenged gently. The older warrior's expression darkened. When technique fails, men die. I've seen it hundreds of times. Nearby, Kenji and Masaru's practice session had devolved into mutual frustration. The younger Ronin's unpredictable style repeatedly penetrated Masaru's careful defenses, while Masaru's constructive criticism was met with dismissive humor. "You're too rigid," Kenji complained, after a particularly ineffective exchange. "By the time you've analyzed the correct response, you'd already be dead." "And you're too impulsive," Masaru countered evenly. "You create openings in your own defense that any experienced opponent would exploit immediately. Yet here I stand, undefeated, while you admit to failing when it mattered most," Kenji replied, with casual cruelty. Masaru's face tightened, but he made no move toward anger. "There are worse failings than excessive caution, young one. You may discover that tomorrow." Daiichi, working alone through increasingly complex forms with his two swords, listened to these exchanges with thinly veiled contempt. If you spent less time talking and more time perfecting your technique, perhaps you might survive longer than the first exchange. This united Kenji and Masaru momentarily in shared offense. "Bold words from a man who betrayed the most sacred relationship in our profession," Kenji retorted. "I did not betray my master," Daiichi corrected coldly. "I surpassed him. There is a difference." The tension in the training area had escalated to dangerous levels when Takeshi intervened. "Enough. These divisions serve only our enemy." He stepped into the center of the space, his authority once again evident in both posture and tone. "We face an opponent beyond our individual capabilities. Either we find a way to function collectively, or we perish separately." A grudging silence fell as each Ronin recognized the truth in his words, if not the sentiment behind them. "We have different approaches to Bushido," Takeshi continued. "Different interpretations of the warrior's code. So be it. But against these star hunters, we need what each of you brings. Hiroshi's experience, Masaru's defensive precision, Kenji's unpredictability, Daiichi's innovative technique." He met each man's gaze in turn. "And most importantly, the courage each of you has demonstrated by choosing to stand and fight when you could have walked away." The sincerity of his words penetrated the barriers of professional pride and past failure that separated them. Hiroshi was the first to respond, offering a formal bow that acknowledged Takeshi's leadership without words. Masaru followed suit, then Kenji with a more casual but genuine nod of acceptance. Only Daiichi hesitated, his expression unreadable. "I fight my own battles," he repeated his earlier statement, but then added with grudging respect, "However, I acknowledge the tactical wisdom of coordination against such an opponent." It was as close to agreement as the proud two-sword master was likely to offer, and Takeshi accepted it with a dignified nod. As they resumed training with fractionally less antagonism, Miyako appeared at the edge of the practice area, her aged face grave. "You should see this," she said, gesturing towards the northern sky. The Ronin followed her gaze to where a new light had appeared, among the early evening stars, brighter than any celestial body save the moon, moving with deliberate purpose, rather than the predictable paths of heavenly objects. "Their main vessel approaches," Takeshi observed, recognizing the pulsing pattern he had witnessed nights before. The light grew steadily larger, descending toward the forest where the smaller craft had first landed. Even from this distance, they could make out its immense scale. Many times larger than the scouting vessel, its shape reminiscent of predatory insects rendered in gleaming metal. "Kami preserve us," Masaru whispered, his habitual caution giving way to momentary awe. "How many of these creatures do you suppose that ship holds?" Kenji wondered aloud, his usual humor absent. "Enough to slaughter every village within 10 RE if they chose to," Hiroshi answered grimly, which makes their adherence to ritual combat all the more significant. They watched in silence as the massive vessel settled into the forest clearing, its descent causing a wind that bent treetops even at this distance. As it touched down, energy patterns rippled across its surface like water disturbed by a stone. "Tomorrow at dawn," Takeshi said quietly, "they will issue their formal challenge. We must be prepared to meet it with all the skill and courage we possess." The gathered Ronin continued watching the alien ship, each man confronting his own mortality in the face of technology and beings beyond human understanding. In that moment, despite their differences, they shared a singular reality. 5 masterless samurai standing against an enemy from beyond the stars, bound by nothing but personal honor and the code of Bushido that each interpreted in his own way. Behind them, the village continued its preparations, sharpening weapons, reinforcing defenses, saying prayers to ancestors and gods alike. But as darkness fell completely, it was the 5 Ronin who stood vigil longest, watching the alien vessel pulse with strange energies against the night sky. A fallen star that brought not wishes, but deadly challenge.